Namaste, everyone. I would like to discuss about intellect and rhythmic intelligence and the difference between intellect and rhythmic intelligence. So, primarily, we are taught in school intellect. We, as a society, focus on being rational, being practical, and we don't dive into the feeling side of life, right? The emotional side, the emotionality. We have all forms of religions that discuss about spirituality, right? But this emotionality I'm talking about is character development, that the intellect can give you a skill when it comes to filling out a job application, filling out a college application, your taxes, when it comes to purchasing a car or purchasing a home, right? But rhythmic intelligence is about the total system, right? So a lot of times that intellect, for many people, the intellect can reject a large portion of our life energy, right? Our life force, right? Because a lot of the life force doesn't necessarily fit into the intellect domain, right? It's more expansive than that, right? The rhythmic intelligence is more expansive than just the intellect, right? So a lot of times, the rational and practical side cannot necessarily understand emotionality, right? That's connected to a woman's menstrual cycle and how it's connected to the moon, right? Astronomy and astrology, astrology and cosmology is something the rational mind and the practical mind of our society that in many ways is leaning more towards like artificial intelligence, leaning more towards robotic, mechanical type of way of connecting to the earth, right? Where basically you just kind of press a button and you get your food right out of like a microwave or something like that, right? Very, very mechanical sort of interaction with life, not really understanding the cultivation of life, the sort of the circle of life, right? And the circle of life has everything to do with the rhythmic intelligence, right? Now, we can look at life like an organism and we can see the mechanics of this organism, right? And that's what we do in through the scientific lens, which is basically our society is driven by that scientific lens, right? That's pretty much what we accept, right? Particularly in this, this patriarchal age that we've been in for thousands of years. So a lot of views of even the views of the shaman, right, which is the healer, when it comes to herbal medicine and when it comes to sort of methodologies and technologies, when it comes to meditation, a sort of pranayama, when it comes to trance states, right, when it comes to chanting, all of that is doesn't fit into the intellect, but it's been practiced for thousands of years, that rhythmic intelligence, because it has everything to do with emotionality and the spirituality combined, right? It's not, when we think of religion, we're thinking of spirituality, right? Where it's a God and the Godhead, right? The priest is the closest to the God, right? The nuns are the closest to the God, and we are working our way to hopefully connect with the God when we die, right? But emotionality and spirituality is about creative destiny, and that's kind of what the shaman works with. On the soulful level of human being, each and every human has creativity. Each and every human has their own light, right? Their own unique light identity, and we desire to experience that in this physical life because it gives us we call higher energy, right? A fuller energy, a fuller range, and a more dynamic, multi-dimensional connection with Earth, right? So, the intuition is kind of what we, can call the rhythmic intelligence, right? Where I'm being intuitively led, right? A lot of creativity is all purely being intuitively led, right? Anything that has to do with reinvention, anything that has to do with transformation is about I am intuitively led. But being intuitively led is not necessarily I'm just putting my hands up in the air and just hope for the best. Like, following your intuition is actually leading you to life lessons and to experiences that may not necessarily be easy. Like, you may be intuitively led to a geographic region that's not necessarily easy for you to be in, because let's say you don't even speak the language, you just speak like a little, right? And then you have to learn, and that's not easy, right? But you are intuitively led there because there's information or there's knowledge that in the bigger picture of your life that you're going to need, right? So let's say in this moment, right, in this 2 years of my life, right, these 2 years that I'm kind of viewing, let's say I don't necessarily need that information, or I'm not using it as much. But let's say 5 years down the road, something opportunity comes and I'm going to need that information, or I'm going to use that information or kind of build upon that, right, including other information I've gathered. So rhythmic intelligence has everything to do with the rhythms, the cycles, and the phases of the earth. So it's very much about being down to earth, right? In our society, we teach a lot about be in the intellect, right? But the thing is to trust yourself. That's something more intimate than just the rational and the practical, right? The sort of scientific, mind that can get very stubborn and very fixed and very set in its ways, right? While that rhythmic intelligence understands more about the evolution of self. It understands about the emotionality and the sort of self-expression and the articulation and the character development, right, of the self, which is something we hope to learn in school. Character development, which we do have recreational activities and bonding with other classmates, but ultimately there's a sense of stress in many young people to get the grade, right, rather than allowing the experience to unfold and allowing their unique light to come through, right? And that's when we can start to get into we can start to lose that sort of unique creative niche that we have, because it doesn't necessarily fit into that intellect mind that in many ways is just primarily focused on food, money, sex, and water, right? It's a survival. Food, money, sex, and water, right? When we think about in my experience of learning the mechanics of an organism, like let's just say the mechanics of like a dolphin, in classes of learning about the dolphin in sort of a basic sort of biology class, right, not going really deep into it, basically there was really no research, or there was really no conversation about the emotionality or the spirituality of this organism. It was more so about the echolocation is for this function so that they can hunt together, so that they can get the fish, gather it, and then the function of this part of the brain is for this, and these type of things, right? The functionality. But the emotionality and the spirituality of, for example, the dolphin, I personally did not have any sort of discussion about that in my class, right? So the rhythmic intelligence is very much has to do with the sort of shaman or the healer, the individual who spends a lot of time in the earth, gathering information, knowledge about the earth, and there's so many different areas of that. when we talk about the shaman, it can be with the herbal realm, right, which is the medicine, the plants. It can be the animal realm, right, which is the connecting to the animals of the region, right, giving respect to the animals, learning about the circle of life. There can be a realm about, midwives, the doulas, who are all about creation and, the woman, right, the feminine energy, and how that moves into life, right, how that moves and kind of governs new generations to come. There's, womanhood, right, there's elders, and all of that really has to do through this sort of tribal, more earthy connection to this planet, has everything to do with understanding emotionality, and the spirituality gives us a uniqueness. It gives us a creative niche, right? That, that mechanical, sort of seeming robotic intellect in many ways cannot give us, is no matter how many courses we take on this business, and I want to get this and I have to get that, and all of this sort of functionality of this business class and this thing, when we get down into it, it's really about the light that shines through. It's really about your creative niche, your emotionality, your spirituality. That really is the space you hold within whatever business or whatever relationship, right? So, and in that, we as human beings tend to live a more fulfilling life, because life becomes, again, it becomes more of you're initiating yourself, you're having experiences, you're experimenting with choices. It's not so like right and wrong, and the point where when you're wrong, I shame myself for the rest of my life and I'm just going to be locked into that, right? It becomes more of a learning experience rather than I just, I'm this or that, right? And I think a lot of this cultural diversity in this intermingling of culture within this whole planet, because people have migrated all across this planet, such as my own ancestors, traveling from Spain and traveling from Germany and traveling from Saudi Arabia and traveling, right, even just in North America. My Native American ancestors have traveled to different geographic regions on the East Coast, right, northern, southern regions, right? And all of that is about cultural intermingling and diversity that basically gives us this character, right? When we have these experiences, when we're experimenting with just going to a Ganesh temple, and or going to the Buddhist temple, or going to the Catholic Church, like just that kind of experience is how we as human beings, we gain wisdom. And that intellect, when we have that rhythmic intelligence, our intellect is more willing to learn, wants to learn perspectives, and is not so aggressive towards perspectives that are different, right? There's a sense of calmness, a willingness, there is quite expansiveness on this planet in many ways. So when I look at like Nikola Tesla and like Einstein and Da Vinci, we think of them like as the supreme intellect. But all of these individuals, if you spoke with them right now, they would basically say, I was just channeling consciousness. Like I was just in a stream of consciousness, right? And these individuals that we see are in our high school textbooks about the intellect, and they possess a sort of high IQ type of thing, right? They're very genius, right? But a lot of them are just rhythmically intelligent, right? And that rhythmic intelligence is very much connected to astronomy, astrology as well as astronomy, right? and connected to like rhythms and cycles and phases of nature. These people pay attention to evolution, and not just the functionality of evolution and how it's changed over a period of time, like apes becoming human. They're more into the emotionality, the spirituality, and that kind of evolution, right? That has to do with the planetary progression, that has to do with humans' progression, the rise and fall of human consciousness. So, the rhythmic, we say rhythmic, rhythmic like the beating drum, of the Native American, right? The beating drum of the shaman and, Saudi Arabia, right? The shaman, it has everything to do with you're wanting to get grounded with your surroundings. You want to listen, you want to heighten your senses, you want to connect with creation. And I think in our society, we have a lot of reptilian sort of influence as well as interference, right? And that reptilian within us, we call that reptilian part of the brain, is very, very mechanical, verbotic, right? It's very much about the functionality and not so much about the emotionality or the spirituality. And we can get locked into that just, that mechanical, robotic sort of reptilian brain, and we lose that sort of soulfulness, we lose that radiance, right? And then when we lose that radiance, we start to disembody and even disassociate with the earth, right? And then therefore we don't really appreciate the earth, and we're starting to take advantage of the earth, and we're sort of not understanding how that affects the ecosystem and how that actually affects the happiness of humans. And we don't even think about, that reptilian brain is not so much thinking about the happiness or the fulfillment. It's thinking about sex, money, food, and water, right? Which is a functionality of dolphins and birds and all animals. But there's an even greater expression, right? That it has somewhat of a mystic quality, it has somewhat of a beautiful quality, it has somewhat of a philosophical quality, a sort of poetic quality, sort of soulful quality. And that has everything to do with the emotionality, and the spirituality gives us the receptivity to these messages, right? To our own expansion, to creation, that that intellect, the ego, right? That ego wants us to be safe, right? It wants us to be comfortable, right? It'd rather keep things as they are than really expand. And we get very nervous when we're expanding. We get very uncomfortable because we're starting to listen to our soul. We're starting to really connect with it and trust in our soul, right? And sometimes our ego on this planet can get very darkened by shame, judgment, feelings not being good enough, and a deep insecurity that has to do with not trusting in your creation, not trusting in your creativity, not having confidence in your creativity. So we compensate through these, comparing, contrasting, competing, that, in many ways we distract ourselves from what actually is that niche. That's really the sort of heart of our, we can call success, right? That's beyond just functionality. Let me dominate the realm of sex, money, food, and water, right? Because we know on this planet that, in this patriarchal age, the emotionality and the spirituality of the tribe has everything to do with the integrity, has everything to do with the character development, right? And, women and men, when they go through a rite of passage or initiation, you just feel, you feel a lot better about yourself, because you're actually getting to know yourself. You're developing these qualities that's not just about how to fill out a job application or get a car, but you're also learning about like patience, and you're experiencing that. You're having a life lesson on patience, and you're not being so hard on yourself about, well, I got to get this, that, and this, and I got to do this and this, right? You're learning a life lesson on unconditional love, and it might not necessarily be easy, right? Because, you know, sometimes our intuition will lead us in, you know, into evolution or creative destiny, but there's things that we have to travel through and that we have to push on, right? There's sort of qualities that we have to develop, and it's on us to develop them. It's on us to trust our intuition, because the moment we stop trusting our intuition and we just kind of give into just the intellect, what happens is, you know, we stop trusting our creativity. We start giving into the society's, you know, whatever limitations and restrictions and, you know, shame, judgment, feelings of not being good enough, and we get very tense. We get very, very tense, right? While, you know, intuition is kind of like, it brings you back to that moment, this moment where, you know, as any shaman understands, and if you're in sort of a chanting sort of ceremony, if you're sort of in a you know, even like a tea ceremony, or if you're in a, you know, dance, sort of full moon dance or something like that, that, you know, even with the Taoists talk about, Confucius talk about, you know, this moment of contentment, right? This moment of really being tapped into your life force and having this kind of personal power that really we gain through this sort of physical connecting and doing things, creative things. And I think of the intellect in many ways, especially in this patriarchal age, because of everything, you know, where we're at as, you know, human or evolution. You know, intellect has a lot of there's a lot of, you know, work slave society with that's that in order for us to break through and to liberate that sort of part of the, you know, intellect, you know, the work slave type of, you know, domination, submission, victim, the martyr, is really through the rhythmic intelligence. That's really how we're able to really build up the confidence in ourselves to actually present a renaissance to this planet, right? Through, and it can just be our own renaissance. It doesn't have to be something that, you know, is, you know, something. It could just be with you and you and you and your household and you and the generations of you, right? And that renaissance can just show up as you gathering knowledge, or gathering, you know, your creativity and really working that into this earth, really sowing that into this earth, you know, really cultivating that in this earth, and that, you know, you offering that to generations, right? So the rhythmic intelligence has everything to do with an elder system, everything to do with the father, the mother, you know, and the many, you know, masculine and feminine energies of you know, usually, you know, older than us, you know, who has been around, and they have stories, you know, and we listen to the stories, and these stories, they teach us things, they reveal things to us about this life, right? And kind of, you know, why we're here in many ways, and what we want to learn and what we want to discover, right? And that sometimes when you listen to the stories of the elders, you know, it's not necessarily easy to listen to, because the things that they had to go through in order to, you know, have that breakthrough and you know, make it through that initiation, right, past this life lesson, right? It required a lot of trust in one's intuition, required a lot of trust in one's life force and personal power, right? So I think the creative destiny has everything to do, not just about, again, we want to know about college application. We want to know, you know, of course, we need to know about taxes and how to get a car and a house and all of that, which is, you know, something we want to learn. But, you know, prosperity, do we really learn about that in school? I didn't even know what that word was. That was not even part of my vocabulary until I was like 19, 20. It wasn't even part of my vocabulary. Like prosperity, right? Most people, it's just money. We don't even know money, currency, prosperity, right? So, the intellect, again, is kind of mixed up with work-slave society, domination, submission, right? It's linked up to, a lot of human condition, right? That shame, judgment, feelings not being good enough, right? But that rhythmic intelligence, it works with, concepts such as prosperity, concepts such as creativity, concepts such as reciprocity, generosity, receptivity, and the sort of kind of space it holds within your life that really just kind of opens you up to call in these channels of these visions that you may have, right? And the kind of life energy you need in your soil of you to be able to hold that, right? So, it's really the soil that's holding all of this life, this abundance. When we think of our garden, right? It's the soil and it's the sun. And we can actually even create a greater life with that, as through our own sound, through our own voice. They even shown in crop circles that the electromagnetic electromagnetic sort of input into the soil from the ET spaceship, right? They actually did an experiment where they put that same electromagnetic ingredients into soil of a crop, and they noticed the crop actually grew. It was even more abundant with the additional electromagnetic sort of energy inputted into the soil. So that is a clear example of electromagnetic. You create electromagnetic, which is just light. It's higher energy. You create electromagnetic through your prayer, through your chanting, through your voice, through you singing to your animal, your plants, yourself. That creates an electromagnetic energy that you can grow, right? You can grow more. And that's the thing about the intellect. We don't really think about the electromagnetic of the heart and how, yes, that actually not just about money. What about prosperity? That's like an even greater sort of expansion, right? But people don't realize that it's going to require you to have these life lessons, to have these experiences, to experiment with these type of things with your own emotionality. It's going to require you to initiate yourself. And the intellect can the intellect will give you a sense of protection, right? A sense of protection. Like, I'm just I'm just gonna stay here, just keep doing this because it seems, that seems practical and rational, right? But really, the rhythmic intelligence is all about you, in the rite of passage of you testing yourself, you challenging yourself, you learning, you reinventing yourself, these type of character development qualities that, we don't really get just, I'm not really going to invite in the personal power, right? The qualities of forgiveness. I'm not really going to practice these, type of things, right? Because I don't need them. Because the intellect says, I can survive without them. But really, we need them because, that's what gets us feeling not only, able to survive, which, it also makes us feel down to earth, and it makes us feel connected to creation. It makes us feel like we're actually are creators, not just a creature, not just some functional creature that's just, sex, money, food, and water, and then that's it, right? We're actually a creator, right? Not just a creature just trying to, look for whatever food that we can find, and that's the circle of life in many ways. where we as human beings have the opportunity where, you know, we have an emotionality and spirituality that's very refined as human beings. And, you know, we have an articulation, an expression, a sound current, a voice that's actually very, very, it's very, very divine and very unique in all of the animals of this world, right, and this planet. So it's just a matter of fact of refining it and developing it and working it, right? And when we're mute and when we're afraid and when we feel very poor and when we feel like this is all that there is, we get our intellect basically, you know, says, okay, that's, you know, I just have to, like, you know, there's no leeway for me to create, right? There's no leeway. And I think, you know, that's what the whole, you know, incarnations that we experience is on this earth, is that yes, we go into these geographic regions that have very low states of consciousness, in the way that, you know, the rhythmic intelligence, the intuition of this this geographic region has been atrophied or has been you know, erased and in many ways just, you know, completely just denied, right? And just the intellect of, you know, sex, money, food, and water has just been the kind of aggression, right? And there's many places on the world like that, and we as human beings, we have, you know, a part of, you know, our sort of life lesson or evolution is working with the self-destruction, because in many ways, you know, when your intellect is inputted, when it, you know, inputted all of, you know, these type of shame, judgment, feelings not being good enough, it's very easy to just self-destruct. And I think that's the great battle of this planet, is self-destruct, right? That we can do when we start to feel disembodied and we start to disassociate with our feelings, we can actually really self-destruct, because, you know, the life force of us, the soul of us, needs to be in this body. And when we're not, in many ways, we're not allowing it to come into the body, what happens is that, you know, we're just feel like we're being pushed out of our own body. But a part of getting it into the body is we do have to, you know, kind of, you know, muscle it up sometimes, right? And sometimes it doesn't look pretty when we're doing that, right? We have experiences, we have life lessons, we have family members, we have conversations, we have, you know, education, where we're going to have to learn how to articulate ourselves and, you know, learn forgiveness as an absolute necessity. Where, you know, we're going to have to learn, you know, a relationship of love. You know, love doesn't always mean we're staying in a relationship, right? So, you know, all of these, you know, type of things we learn in the tribe. And that's why, you know, the whales, I see the whales of possessing a similar emotionality and spirituality to the tribe, right? Of, you know, very, you know, close-knit tribe, is because there is this sort of focus, yes, on the functionality of, like, yes, you know, you have your responsibility, you have your duty, but there's also this sense of responsibility to the unit, to the pod, to the group, right? And that sort of responsibility has everything to do with helping each other to have experiences, have life lessons, to be educated, to share, to be heard, so that they can start to really emerge and really embody. And we can't really embody this physical with the soul energy when we don't feel heard, we don't feel listened, you know, we have no time for each other, you know, we're unavailable to ourselves, we don't even trust each other, we don't even know what trust is, we don't even trust ourselves, we don't even kind of feel connected to anything. Oh my gosh, Pepe. We don't even feel that we're cultivating this land, that we're cultivating this earth, right? And I think that's what, because the mechanic, the robotic, the sort of artificial intelligence of ourselves doesn't necessarily give us the education on how to cultivate the land. right? How to cultivate ourselves, how to nourish ourselves, how to cultivate ourselves in the way that we have this kind of natural confidence about ourselves that is not so nervous and not so intimidated by the society, but is quite enthusiastic about moving through society to gain the knowledge, information that you need on a personal level, on a sort of, soul level, to be able to create whatever it is that you're needing to create. And it could be something, usually it's something that has to do with, the healing of generations, the sort of the clearing of generations, the protection of generations, past, future generations, present generations, and has everything to do with getting, human beings more embodied. Is really is why we are initiated by our tribe. We want to get the soul in the body. We want to be embodied, not just a body that, we're like looking at like, what is this? Like after 80 years and we're like, what is, completely just kind of, like not even there, right? We want to be embodied. And that's why young people, kids, even teens, they have this kind of spirit, right? They have this kind of spirit, they're not so in the mechanical, like zoned into like whatever it is. They're fixated on, I have to have this, I have to do this, and this, right? That they're embodied in the kind of soulful, more philosophical energy, emotionality, the spiritual, that's not religious. A lot of these kids have no idea what religion they're in. They could be going to, the Ganesh temple for years, and they're just like, they don't really understand the difference between the Ganesh temple and church or something, the Catholic church, right? Until they get older and they start to, the intellect starts to create opinions. One is better, one is less. This is good, this is not good, right? So the intellect is there in many ways to be a safeguard, to be a protection, but the intuition is, I feel, the rhythmic intelligence is an even greater protection. Because not only are you able to be discerning, but you're also to possess a sort of independent mind where you can be in the sort of group think, right? Drinking from the Kool-Aid, right? But you can also be an independent mind where you are able, we could say think for yourself, but you're also able to go out into nature and to have these experiences, Da Vinci, Nikola Tesla have, which is an experience of your light, the experience of your soul, the experience of creation, experience of creative ideas being given to you, and you getting to see them actually grow into something that is quite evolutionary to what you feel and to how people think, that gives this sort of energy to this planet of reinvention, sort of opening up space, clearing of space, healing of space, so that human beings can move and sort of maneuver through this earth with a sense of freedom, right? And that's really what we do in that independent mind, in that kind of rhythmic intelligence, is we're healing, clearing, sort of creating space for freedom, for people to have the knowledge of the personal power, the life force, or that kind of sort of embodied examples, these elders, for that, so that they too can create this evolution for their own reinvention, right? That really brings clarity and reassurance, the sense of being heard, the sense of feeling of belonging on this planet. So many of us just in the intellect, so many young people feel like they do not belong. They don't belong in this thing, that thing, and it has a lot to do with trusting, your intuition, having that confidence, learning these lessons, having these experiences. What is patience? What is compassion? What is resilience? What is determination? What is prosperity? And actually going out there and getting in contact with that, even if that means, like, for a lot of people, like, to get a Kriya in the not so distant past, like, you would have to spend years just, in the temple, like scrubbing the floors or something like that, or, taking, just doing something, right, for the guru or something like that, right? And it was all seen with enthusiasm, because when you are practicing qualities of life that give you this emotionality, this spirituality that makes you feel confident in your stance with creation, right? It becomes worth it, right? It becomes worth it when you're spending those hours and you're going to school or whatever it is, and it becomes worth it because you understand that you are potentiating yourself further by inviting in experiences, life lessons, and even just your own sort of meditation, your own sort of just dropping into yourself, that as if you continue, that you will bring more of yourself into the body, and you will feel more embodied, more connected to your voice, your sound, your heart, and your life force, which is really what we want, is to be in touch with our life force.